Hello, everyone. I'm Robyn Grable, the founder of Talents Ascend and the Ascend Collective, and your host for Ascending Beyond Barriers. Welcome. Ascending Beyond Barriers is an inspiring podcast dedicated to showcasing the remarkable journeys of small business founders who have faced and overcome significant challenges on their path to success. Each episode delves into the personal stories of entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, highlighting their unique experiences, struggles, and triumphs. Honored to have Carmine Cicalese on today. He is a former U.S. Army officer with a distinguished career in communications and cyber warfare. Now the president of Cyber Check LLC, Carm helps mid-market and small businesses keep cybersecurity boring, love that, by making it simple and effective. With hands-on experience from system administration to coordinating cyber and electronic warfare operations, he brings both technical depth and leadership insight. Carm also serves on the Technology Council of Central Pennsylvania Advisory Group and is a certified board qualified technical expert. He lives in South Central Pennsylvania with his family, where he enjoys exercising, golfing, and gardening. Carm, thanks so much for being here. I'm honored, like I said, to have you on. Thank you so much. And I love, I've always loved, since I connected with you on LinkedIn, I love that keep cybersecurity boring, which is awesome. We'll talk about that. But tell us about your service in the Army. I always like to start there. I like to talk about people's time and your transition. How was all of that for you?
Hi, Robyn. Thanks for the great introduction. I think my mom would be proud of it. And
Absolutely.
It's a real pleasure to be here. You know, I spent 29 years in the Army and started off my commission from West Point in 1987 and entered into the Army's Signal Corps Communications. A lot of tactical communications at first, radios and the like. And then by the 90s, you know, computers were starting to become popular. And I had a boss, he was actually an aviator, and he really liked computers, and he had learned about the internet and the like, and he was like, we're going to be the first on the internet. And we were, and suddenly I had a very keen interest in computers and the like, and we were connecting at a whopping 9,600 baud, which isn't very much, of course, by today's standards. But,
right.
You know, that was starting to cut my teeth on computers. And then in the late 90s, I found myself at Fort Meade, and I was with an intelligence unit, and we were responsible for, you know, maintaining their Novell server and email system. Everybody had their own thing. It was really, really, really the wild, wild west, and everybody was doing their own thing. Also saw what they had to do, and they had a cyber forensics organization and technical surveillance or you know, bug sweeping and detection. They also had the polygraphy or lie detection team. So it was very interesting. And then I spent a couple of years at the National Security Agency doing information assurance, which is, you know, protecting communications. And of course, the other side to that is signals intelligence. And I saw that side too. And something else was coming along called information operations or information warfare. I got into that in 2000. And then the wars broke out, and I spent a lot of time overseas with Special Operations Command and 1st Cav Division, throwing the information warfare kitchen sink at our adversaries. And after that, I had a chance to go teach in Norfolk, Virginia, at a Navy facility, which was a lot of fun. I got to be the director of a school and taught everybody what I thought I learned about communications and about information warfare. It was rather serendipitous, and that we had 2 different schools there from both halves of my career. And I was going to retire again, actually the second time, and I got conned out of retirement to take a job in the Pentagon.
Ooh.
And yeah, people say, ooh, it's a nice place to visit. It was a learning experience, but it was a lot of fun.
For those of us who haven't worked there, we always say, ooh, you know?
Yeah. No, it was a very good experience. I had the opportunity to be part of something special as we built the Army's contribution to U.S. Cyber Command and the Cyber Mission Force, and I developed a lot of the Army's capabilities. And it's really, really very rewarding to look back now when I see, for example, the Army Cyber Institute celebrating their 10-year anniversary and knowing that you had a direct part in establishing that. So all those 10-year anniversaries come up, and now 15-year anniversaries come up and say we had a part of that. So that was a lot of fun for me in that regard. And 29 years, I had a great run. I made it to Colonel. Hey, life was good.
Yeah. So amazing. Thank you for all of that. And thank you for wearing the uniform for so long, 29 years. Wow. That's just,
It was my privilege. And I say, I thank people say thank you. Of course, I say you're welcome, but thank you back. As I like to say, I had 3 hots and a cot. What am I going to complain about? Right.
Right.
Three meals and a place to sleep. And if it's dry, all the better.
Exactly. So how was your transition out? How did that, when you made the decision to retire, what did you do next?
Sure. So I do want to caveat that I retired 3 times, and the third time I actually followed through.
Okay.
And it was after the second time that I pulled my paperwork. My family told me I was no longer allowed to harass pro athletes who would retire and unretire.
Oh,
It was like, yeah. Well, that was me. So I had to eat some crow on that one. But when it was time to go the third time, I really think it was the time to go. We had a great run, but we were running out of things to do. As a colonel, and being in the Pentagon for what I did, there weren't many more places to go, and I could have done like another year or 10 months, and that's what are you going to get out of it, and the like. But it was it was a great run. So transition. I think the best advice I got was there's 3 things to look out for. One is how much do you want to make? What do you want to do? And where do you want to live? Pick the most important one and everything else will fall into place. And that's pretty much what happened. Because as we went through the process, what we realized is we want to live near family. So most of my family has transplanted from New Jersey to Florida. Wife's family was in Pennsylvania. We weren't ready for Florida. Florida's a nice place, but sometimes it's really hot and the like. So we decided to stay in Pennsylvania. And I'm still close to friends and family in New Jersey. We've got my wife's family here in Pennsylvania. It's 2 hours from D.C., traffic notwithstanding, right? So it's a great location. Really, really enjoy it. And then from there, things started to fall into place. I did work with ACP, and I'm sorry, their acronym escapes me right now. I'm sure it'll come later on, but they assigned like a mentor to me who was the owner and CEO of a cybersecurity intelligence company, Christopher Alberg, who's like CEO of Recorded Future. He was a ton of help. He made some very good connections for me, and we had some great interviews with some very large companies and the like. But what it did, though, too, is also help me flesh out what did I want to do. And in there, what I realized is I wanted to be my boss. I wanted to be the boss of something, and I wanted to be able to set my own tone, set the company culture and the like, and more answer to myself than somebody else. And that's where I decided to start my own business, consulting business.
Yeah. Had you had any entrepreneurial, aspirations before that?
Not really. I had considered it a little bit, but when I was going through transition and they had the Boots to Business program, I think it's a B2B or something like that. I passed on it. I said, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. Although I had some inklings of, some type of franchise or something as a different idea, but it never really stuck. So I could have and should have done that. It would have made things easier, quite frankly, but I didn't.
Yeah. So what have you found has been the hardest struggle in having your own business?
Oh, that's easy. That's the entrepreneur mindset. Right?
Oh, okay.
And what are you getting into?
Yeah.
So there's 2 things. One is that when you start your own business, and I learned this after I started my own business, you should know what your end game looks like for that business. I want to get it to X and then I'm going to sell it, or I'm going to transition it to family, or whatever the case may be. So have an exit plan from the get-go. I didn't do that. Okay, that's just lesson learned. But that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is the entrepreneur mindset, which I'm going to paraphrase that I heard from a mentor who paraphrased Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
And you have to be an entrepreneur, to be successful, you have to be, one, arrogant enough to believe that you have a product the customer wants and you can figure out how to get it to them. And two, pessimistic enough to understand you might fail and have a graceful exit. And then deal with the space in between, the ambiguity in between those two spots. And there's a lot of ambiguity.
I like that. I have the arrogance for sure. I don't have the pessimism. That's the part I'm missing. I just can't be pessimistic.
Well, there you go. It's it's like this. Is it just in the back of my head? It's like I have a plan. It's like if I had to end today, what would it look like?
Right.
And I know what that is.
Yeah.
Right.
So when did you start your business? How long have you had it?
So I organized in December of 2016. So we're approaching our 9th year.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It started with a couple of things. While I was still on break from, took a few months off, and that was some very important advice. If you can swing it, take 6 months off. Decompress. You don't realize how tightly you're wound up. Take a break. Especially if you're going to move. Find a nice house, find your house, fix it up, do some things, relax, do some things you like to do. Don't just turn right around and roll into it. So I have, by contrast, I had a friend of mine. He's a couple years senior to me in military. He got out, and then I think he took off 40 days before he rolled into a contractor position. And now he's been doing that for, it was almost 20 years. And
wow.
Now he's kind of entering into another level of, another time in his life. And it's you never really do. 40 days is not enough time to decompress.
Yeah.
It's not enough. You really do. You have to relax. You have to enjoy some things. And the other thing is you have to look at the world around you from a different lens, because, the world I operate in now doesn't operate the way the government does. No. It's not a bad thing. Neither one of them is a bad thing. It's the way they are.
Right.
But sometimes there are some aspects of it that can be negative. And you have to be aware of those biases.
Yeah. What's been one of the best things about being an entrepreneur?
Freedom. My autonomy. Right?
Yeah.
I'm responsible for maintaining my day. I'm responsible for the decisions of the company. I have to live with sometimes my dumb decisions.
Yeah.
And there's still no shortage of them, You ever sit there and say, why are we doing this? Right? That happens in the military, and maybe you don't see the big picture, or you don't agree with it, or whatever the case may be, but you got to go do what you got to go do. That's your job. And, now as the owner of the business, I get to make the decisions. And, if I don't like it, I'm no one to blame but myself.
Right.
As a friend of mine, he said when he was in his own business, he's like, sometimes I didn't like working for the man, even when I was the man.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is a heavy, I started to use the word burden. It's not really a burden. It is a heavy load, though, to have that responsibility. And then when you have employees and you have that responsibility, it can be stressful to do that. So what do you think? What's the one thing you learned from the Army that you brought into your business?
Oh, there's lots.
Yeah.
Being responsible, I think, is the biggest one as an entrepreneur. Is you as the business owner, as an entrepreneur, you have to take responsibility, for what you do and you don't do. Yeah. And that's the biggest. To me is the biggest thing. And There's a lot to learn about business. Some of it is intuitive. I found that leadership and finances, is kind of intuitive. Other things like marketing and sales. Marketing, even though I had some experience with it, I sometimes didn't make the right decisions, or I made like emotional decisions, or I like made what I like, not necessarily think about like what's the customer want. And
Right?
sales, I'm telling you, sales on the private side is very different. It is not a natural conversation.
No.
You really have to, you have to learn to listen from your client's perspective and think like them and ask questions to learn more about it, which
Yeah.
is I identified as kind of a weakness, because sometimes in the military I didn't necessarily ask questions. You're in a long meeting, a lot of times a long planning meeting. You're getting direction from the boss. The boss tells you to do something. You're like, got it. If I've got a question, I'll go back later on, or I don't want to drag this meeting out any longer, or I'll go back and say, here's what I heard, right? And this is,
Yeah.
and the like. And but there's other opportunities for back and forth. But don't always, you just can't, and you're doing sales and stuff like that, you just can't accept everything at face value. You need to ask more questions so you can fully understand whether or not they need your services, or if they need the services, what it is you need. So you got to keep asking questions.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny we're having this conversation because I was listening to a training today from Sandler, sales training, and that's exactly what it was about. Salespeople need to ask more questions, and instead of thinking they have all the answers already, you got to get out what the client needs you to know, and you can only do that by asking questions. So I'm not good at that either.
Yeah, sorry, no, I'm not. I'm not. This is not a paid advertisement, but I think Sandler has some very good training. My sales coach has a Sandler background, and from meeting other Sandler people, that's what kind of got me interested in that.
Yeah.
You're learning to ask the basic questions, the next level questions. And I like to tell this story. There are times where I can go back to certain discussions and tell you exactly where I lost the sale. You know why? I didn't shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing I've learned too in sales. The silence, don't be the one who breaks the silence. If you have those situations where you want the client to think about it and make a decision, don't be the one to break that silence, because you talk too much and you lose them. So that's good advice. But all right, so let's talk about keep cybersecurity boring. Where did that come from? Tell us about it. Don't scare me too much, because I know there's some scary stuff when it comes to cybersecurity that I probably don't want to know. So tell us about your company and what you're doing.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I had some experience with marketing, and when we started, Cyber Check or Cyber CIC actually had a meeting. It was Cyber Information and Cognitive Security Strategies and Training. And that's because we started off doing work for the Department of Defense. As I was saying, I was contacted, about my LinkedIn profile, and then I had a former boss came up to me and approached me about getting some help with the National Guard and the like. And from there, we did a lot of work for the Army, Department of Defense, tabletop exercises, doctrine reviews, and the like for information warfare. And at the time, our branding was make better decisions, which tilts towards cognitive security, which is, I wanted to say trusting your decision, trust your decisions, but the Wall Street Journal was already using it. So I couldn't use that. But of course, as we started to move towards the private side in about 2022, somebody was like, okay, what exactly does this mean? Make better decisions. Well, make better cybersecurity decisions. Yeah, but wasn't really intuitive to what the business does. You follow on that? So I was working. It's been about, I guess, I've been working with my current marketer a little over a year. But I think it was about a year ago. We were putting our heads together, and I think Heather might have said it first, but whatever. We came up with keep cybersecurity boring. Let's, what are we about? Because before, like I said, we were cyber information and cognitive security, and then we just shifted cybersecurity for any customer. So now you're dealing with the same talent pool, you're dealing with the same actions. It got a little more simplicity. We got away from the Department of Defense for many reasons. Some of the bidding process is what it is for the government, but sometimes it's like being an Army staff officer. It's a grind. It's not necessarily a lot of fun. But also the government's on a different schedule and a different time schedule. And at the same time, I started to see and do some things in the private space. I was like, hey, this is fun. This is different. And that was the big thing. This is different. Let's go do something different. And now we shifted, towards the private space. And, they don't worry about holistic information or cyber warfare there because a lot of it you can't do, but it's really just about protecting yourself. And that's where cybersecurity comes in. So why do we want to keep it boring? Well, if you think about it, what's the worst thing that can happen is a breach. And breaches can make the blood pressure and the anxiety and stress levels go up. And we don't want that. We're like, what's the opposite of stressful? It's boring. So let's keep cybersecurity boring. That's how we got there. And just the bad guys are out there. Again, not too many stories here, but here we go. Cybercrime is a $10 trillion business.
Oh my gosh.
It is the third largest economy next to the United States and China.
Wow. And so when you say cybercrime, give us a couple of examples, because I probably don't know, and maybe some of our listeners don't know either. Kind of what does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, the first one is where they take your data and they hold it hostage, or ransomware, and they're trying to extort money from the business to get their data back intact. Right. And the other part to that is the ability to sell that data, especially like anything to do with private identifiable information, or PII, to sell that data. For example, a PII file can go for $1,000 on the dark web, right? Seriously? So if you nail 40,000, for example, PII files from a large company, that translates into a fair amount of money that you can make on the dark web.
And so who do they sell it to? Like, on the dark web, like who wants that?
They sell it to other criminals.
Oh my gosh.
Because they want it, because identity theft is a $50 billion business. Not 10 trillion, not quite 10 trillion, but it's still a pretty large business.
Wow.
And some of it can be, quote unquote, easy money for them because of certain protections that are out there. For example, when was the last time you had to pay a faulty credit card bill? Or charge? Rarely ever anymore, right? Because the laws are such that it's protected. And at the same time, they're making enough money where they can kind of sort of absorb these things, or at least they have the means to track it down and recoup that money, right? Yeah. So they're better equipped to get those means to do that. That's why you maybe don't worry about it as much. But there's all kinds of gimmicks going on. There's title fraud, identity theft. I do say this about some of the services out there for to protect your identity or protect your title. Just understand they're kind of backwards looking. It happens after the fact, or they tell you maybe after the fact. Title fraud insurance in particular, it's like $19.95 a month or something like that. You can get it cheaper yourself if you just call and contact your county commissioner or whoever maintains the title. And they all have a way of notifying people if they request it, if their title is, if anyone puts a lien on it or puts a request on it. So there's things you can do yourself that will minimize your exposure without having to pay anybody money.
Wow. So how often does this happen for like a small business? Is that a thing? Yeah. I mean, I always think about us. I mean, we don't have any PII on purpose. We're a small business. Like, what is our threat level?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Because you talked about two key things in there. One, what's the key data that you need to protect? Well, you insinuated, well, we don't keep PII intentionally. right? So
Yeah.
from there, you don't have to answer the question on the air. You just answer to yourself, what's the key data that I have to protect? And then say, well, what's the threat? And who's going to come after you is anybody who thinks that they can either get you, there's a few different ways, though, that they can get you to lose money or give them money. And one is through like fraudulent billing, depending on who handles your invoices, right? Another one is fraudulent compensation, which is, the employee who says, I want to change where my check goes every month, right? And then the third one is just overall ransomware. If I block your access to your data so that you can't operate, what's it worth to you to be back in business?
Okay.
So small businesses account for more than 95% of cyber insurance claims.
Wow, really? That's hurtful.
And
that hurt.
So if I may, I'll talk about 3 or 4 myths that I have to small businesses. Myth number one is it's an IT risk. No, because IT's there to make sure that your data is accessible and that your technology supports your workflows. It's not IT's fault, again, when invoicing pays a fake bill or HR pays the wrong person. So cyber is not an IT risk, it's a business risk. The second one I hear is, I don't need cyber expertise, I have cyber insurance. Well, you haven't done anything to reduce the likelihood of it happening. However, if you take the right steps, you can reduce the threat of the likelihood of it happening and reduce your risk and reduce your cyber insurance premium.
Yeah.
But that's
and insurance is after the fact also, right? The damage is done, and yes, you might recoup some of it, but the damage is done.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I'm not going to talk it away because that's what it's there. It's there to manage your residual risk. Because to do a full up, I would say, the best possible cybersecurity is not cheap.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Especially if you're talking about you layering on what a security operations center or SOC, or some of the more advanced processes and technologies. They cost the money that's just like, okay, this is where I'm going to use insurance to cover that risk, and you want to make sure that your insurance though covers those particular types of risks, whether it's ransomware or social engineering. And the third risk that we get is it's not going to happen to me. The fourth risk I've kind of developed now. Those are the big three. The fourth one I'm kind of tinkering with is adequate cyber compliance does not equal strong enough cybersecurity. And that means anybody who has to hit some type of compliance, especially because we deal with financial services and the like, that doesn't mean that you've got enough cybersecurity. Recently there have been a couple of large companies were hit, and I'm telling you what, I'm sure they had world-class compliance operations, and they still got breached.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. All right. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, because I could have like 1,000 more questions on this that would be very helpful for our listeners, I'm sure. But leave us with what's the most important thing a small business entrepreneur needs to know about cybersecurity. You probably already talked about it in your risks there, which are really good. But give us your closing remarks on what is the one thing you want small business owners to think about cybersecurity.
So, don't succumb to any of the myths I talked about.
Yes.
Right? That's where you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Having said that, a good cyber or a good IT provider is a good place to start so that you get some of those basics that you need, like multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection, antivirus, and the like. But you're going to have to do more. But again, that's a good place to start. And, don't take it for granted. Think about what is your business worth to you and get in it for the long play and, if necessary, the slow play. But just start doing something, even if it's just incremental, and take on a little bit each year.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's keep cybersecurity boring. Carm, thank you so
Okay.
much for being here. Thank you for thank you for your time in the Army and all that you did for us and what you're doing now to protect businesses. So really appreciate you, and good talking with you today.
It's my pleasure, Robyn. Thanks a bunch. I had a great time. Thank you so much.